It's happened again. Just the amount of different ways, the amount of different things that came to mind when I started reading this story. Where I might even still call the video this. I was going to call the video "Sometimes I Hate the Gaming Industry" because this stuff just keeps happening. How many times are we going to find out after the fact that the dream project did exist and the thing that would have sold did exist, but a bunch of just executives got in the way, a bunch of people who fall back on test audience data, and a complete lack of authorship or investment in what built the industry in the first place. All these people who come swinging in wanting to cash in on past successes, they're the ones who get in the way and go, no, that's not going to work, that's not going to sell, let's cancel it. Oh, I'm talking about Saints Row 5, which all the information has finally come out as to what the version of Saints Row could have been, rather than the stupid one that we got in 2022, which was, as we now know, a weird test audience executive corpo version of Saints Row, when we could have had a follow-up to Saints Row 3. Oh, God. I'm going to break all this stuff down. We have all the information coming from Mr. Saints Godzilla over on YouTube, who, assumedly, there's now an NDA, which is up. That's how they're able to talk about this stuff. They visited the developer Volition Studios a few years back and found out a whole bunch of stuff in regards to what the developer was trying to put together before the project was overhauled, and we got the student loan Saints Row. I'm doing the quotations, but it's not, to be honest. That is what we got. We got this version of Saints Row where a whole bunch of wannabe gangsters were paying off their student loans, which could have totally worked if you had tighter writing and you made the tonality work a lot better. But I'm just going to read this stuff out, and we'll try not to lose our minds too much. The thing that I'm reading out, like I said, it originally came from Mr. Saints Godzilla. It was then summarized over on Twitter by a Twitter account called Synth Potato. I then went through all of their stuff and did my own summary. And you can read the whole thing, obviously, over on Twitter. I'll put the link in the description. It's just sad. You know, it reminds me of what we could have got from Rocksteady, instead of Suicide Squad. It makes me think of all the information that came out about how Rocksteady and, wanted to do like a Batman Beyond game. We were going to get that Damian Wayne game from Warner Brothers Montreal. And then Warner Brothers are like, nah, nobody wants that, even though everybody was requesting it for years during the rollout of the Arkham trilogy. And we ended up just getting Suicide Squad, which everybody could tell was not going to make it. And then when it got delayed for a year, it was like, well, it's really not going to make it. And then the game came out and just bombed immediately. So I don't know why, when an open goal is presented and the ball is right there, they can't just flick the thing in. They have to go, hey, what if we moved the goalpost? What if we thought about what the ball really is? Just put the ball in the goal. You got a team of people who are built to be ball goal putter inners, and you end up making them do something else. Anyway, Saints Row. This comes from Mr. Saints Godzilla, who says that the original version of Saints Row 2022 was called Saints Row 5. It was literally going to be Saints Row 5, and it was designed to be a continuation from Saints Row 3. It was going to be retconning all of the installments that came afterwards, Gat Out of Hell, Agents of Mayhem, and the Saints Row 2022 edition. It was going to retcon all that stuff by just continuing from the end of Saints Row 3 instead. Now, I don't mind Saints Row 4, but that is the beginning of the end in regards to taking the tonality way too far, giving the characters superpowers. It was all way more over the top. It felt like they just didn't know where to go with that series. So they steered increasingly into the likes of, the overblown nature of, action set pieces, crazy self-aware dialogue, things like that. But if they went back to Saints Row 3 and carried on from the end of that, that would have worked a hell of a lot better. Saints 3 is my favorite one. I know a lot of people absolutely love Saints 2, but I love Saints 3. I think the level of writing in that game, the action set pieces, the level design, the pace, I think that stuff works really, really well. And that would have been a good way to keep going forward. So that's what we would have got. That would have totally worked. The quote from the write-up is that this version of Saints Row 5 was designed to appease old fans and check off all their requests. And the tone would have followed a 20-80 rule. 20% Saints Row 3, 80% Saints Row 2, which is a good way to go. Like, that's a good mix. Like, I think you'll find that most Saints Row fans either love the original because of what it represented when it first came out, being the first next-gen GTA type open world crime sandbox game, or they love Saints Row 2 because it was just enough of an injection of the ridiculousness without being too over the top, like in Saints 3 and especially in Saints 4. Sadly, though, this idea for Saints Row 5 was apparently completely rejected by THQ Nordic after they acquired Deep Silver and Volition. Volition were renamed Deep Silver Volition. Volition. There's a whole thing with Volition as a studio, one of the most gifted studios in the history of gaming that sadly went defunct 1 year after Saints Row 2022 because that game sold so unbelievably badly. But if you go back in time a little bit more, Volition were the guys going, hey, shall we make this game? Should we make Saints Row 5? We should do the one that continues on from Saints Row 3. And the executives came in and said, no, that's not going to work. We're going to need a completely different pitch. So they had to go back to the drawing board. Apparently, another version that was pitched was a reboot of the original game, but it would be, it'd still be continuing with the original characters. Julius and Johnny Gat and everybody else, the characters that everybody knows and loves, or at least associates with Saints Row, not the newcomers that were put in 2022. They tried taking that to THQ Nordic and said, hey, should we do this? At least it'll still be the Saints Row that people know and love. And that was also pushed back. So there were two versions of what would have been the fifth main Saints Row that were pushed back and just completely outright rejected. The Saints Godzilla video doesn't go into more detail in that regard, but it's only a part one. It's an hour long and it's a part one. So I think we're going to find out more over time as to what the hell happened behind the scenes. And I have to imagine that there are more members of Volition that will be happy to talk about this stuff because it is just stupid. And I imagine if you're on the front lines, sitting in those meetings, just having to listen, and I speak from first-hand experience, being in corporate meetings, listening to people who don't know what the hell they're talking about, guiding things that you know inside out. That is a level of frustration that is unique to being in a creative medium that is ran by completely blind, feckless executives. And you just have to put up with it because it's like, well, they've got the money, in theory, they've got the experience. The most ridiculous part of this is that a lot of the notes that came back from the executives wanted to cut back on the violence and the swearing. Which is like, what are you guys even making at that point? What do you think you're making? Clearly they were trying to aim for the widest audience possible, which is the only thing that executives ever do. It's always water down the distilled, beautiful potion that we were all drinking beforehand. Just water it down, make it more palatable, make it more tasteless, make it water, because everybody needs to drink water and stay hydrated. Go down that route. Everybody needs that. Don't worry about a specific flavor. They wanted to cut down on the violence and the swearing. That was why taking hostages was taken out of Saints Row 2022, because apparently executives thought that was too violent, even though it was in previous Saints Rows and it was a worthwhile game mechanic. That was taken out. It's why the scripting overall, the script for the game was smoothed over so much to the point where it removed any edge whatsoever, and why the likes of the LARPing mission, which is singled out as an example here, the LARPing mission that everybody hated in Saints Row 2022, where you have to LARP and go down this weird fantasy thing. The initial version of that mission involved real weapons and just taking out the dudes that were LARPers rather than taking part in the fantasy yourself. That was rejected as well. They had to go down this other route of making this LARPing mission. It's just such a farce. And the last thing to spotlight in regards to, game mechanics, which is something that made its way into the 2022 edition, is looking after different districts and looking after the city map itself, the criminal activities. Now, this is all done through a menu in the 2022 edition, but what the original plan was from Volition is that you would take over different districts and you would customize them. You could actually come up with your own custom laws that people had to follow. Examples given were forcing stupid dress codes or ways for people to behave, that you could then enforce through law as you became the boss of all these various different districts, the boss character carrying on from the previous Saints games as well. There would also be heavy customization of your HQ. You would have the return to the church, so the original Saints church from the first games, and you would be customizing that with furniture and different items that you would unlock over time. All of that stuff, remnants of it are in the 2022 edition, but they're not really brought to the fore. They're not really encouraged. They're not something that feels like a sellable signature element of that game. They're just kind of there. And like I said, the customization of the district stuff is a very light version of that, is done through the menus in the 2022 edition, which it feels like a studio that have been through the ringer, putting what they can of their ideas into the game after being rejected so much by the executives and by, and having to sort of do what they can in the remaining time after having so much time wasted. Because the thing you'll always find with this stuff is that executives will reject stuff and go, that's not going to sell, that's not going to work, but then turn us around an entire new version of the game in half the time now. We're not going to extend the release date. We're not going to make sure that you have the time to go back to the drawing board. We're just going to ask you to do everything twice or thrice as fast, and then you'll have to release a broken version of the game and just patch it later. Don't worry about it, just patch it later. Oh, you're not able to patch it later? Oh, okay, we're going to do some layoffs. We're going to get rid of you, and we'll just try again with another studio. Very annoying. You wonder why I started doing the Just Good Game News and the Just Good Game Show, to force some positivity and stick to some positives every single week. Every Friday afternoon, if you want a good positive gaming show, it's the Just Good Game News. Plug, plug, plug. Because I needed this for my own sanity. But every now and then, something like this comes around that is just so painfully dumb that it's fun to react to and get the frustrations out. But dear God, the gaming industry can be one of the dumbest places on earth.